Who can say what people like most about 2020? We do know from talking to you and from letters we get that what we refer to as coping stories seem to have enormous impact. Now, a story we did on depression, for instance, brought in over 50,000 letters. Well, John Stossel is here with a look back. John?
Hugh, it always amazes me that the scientists who make medical breakthroughs publish them in the journal of obscure gosh knows what, and then often nothing ever comes of it. The news doesn't get out. Well, we search through those journals looking for discoveries that may make your life better. Here's a sampling, starting with the biggest medical story of the decade, AIDS.
With reported cases doubling every 6 months, AIDS has now been identified in over 35 states.
Geraldo Rivera began reporting on the disease at a time when other media hardly mentioned it. We've stayed on the story, reporting on the nation's blood supply.
24,000 people had received AIDS-contaminated blood.
On safe sex.
Here in San Francisco, a recent survey shows that almost every high school student knows how the disease is transmitted, and most understand that condoms can prevent its spread.
And what better way to combat hysteria about the disease than to see Barbara Walters hugging a baby who has AIDS?
You and I cannot get AIDS by kissing or cleaning this baby.
And while reporting on AIDS, we've met some exceptional people.
Before I got Capuchins, I thought I was a pretty good-looking guy, average but happy, and now I actually see myself fading away.
In 1985, Geraldo brought us the story of 24-year-old Amy Sloan. She's an Indiana woman who got AIDS from a blood transfusion.
Amy's experience has been echoed all across the country, as AIDS, in a sense, has become an all-American epidemic.
I'd like to think that I could raise my son and be a real influence on him and on the world, because I think that I have something really important to say. But realistically, I think I'm probably going to die.
Fortunately, most of our medical stories have happy endings.
Second, deep. Hold it.
We've tried over the last 10 years to show new solutions to medical problems. Often people suffer unnecessarily because they just don't know how to get help.
This is Belinda, and she is having a panic attack.
In 1982, Hugh Downs reported on anxiety disease.
When I have a panic attack, I'm shaky, sometimes sick. My heart begins to beat very hard. I start to get very, very scared. Am I going to die? What's going to happen? Am I going to jump? And I feel like I'm going to lose control. What is wrong? Oh, my gosh.
Panic attacks like Belinda's were once thought to be an emotional problem. Sufferers were told, just relax. Well, that didn't help. We learned it's actually a physical disorder that can be treated with chemical therapy. Belinda is now cured. Likewise, I reported on Kathleen Page. She and thousands of Americans have a little-known disease called obsessive-compulsive disorder. Kathleen's symptom, she can't stop cleaning.
I clean everything, and I don't swerve one iota from the way I do it.
She starts cleaning when she comes home from work and doesn't stop until 3 in the morning. She does this every day. For years, people had told her, "You're just crazy." And she believed.
And I would just cry. I would say, God, what are you doing to me? What did I do to deserve this?
It turns out Kathleen's compulsion was caused by a chemical imbalance. Treatment has changed her life. Today she's recovered, and she's got a boyfriend.
He was my buddy. He was my best buddy. And it was really hard to lose him.
Often we report on emotional problems, and in this case the help usually comes from the field of psychology. In 1986, Roger Karras reported on coping with the death of a pet. He found many hospitals now train grief counselors to help people deal with their loss.
I don't want to say. Let's put her to sleep. It just sounds so final.
You'll see that she goes very quickly, and there's not a lot of pain involved, and there'll be some comfort in seeing that.
The message they send? Grief for your pet is an honest emotion. Express it. Don't swallow it. Get it out.
Your letters tell us that these types of stories, in which specialists tell us how better to cope with everyday problems, are what you want most from 2020. Experts have shown us all kinds of treatments for things like anger, jealousy, even shyness. A therapist told this woman, to overcome your shyness, you must do exercises like go into this coffee shop and talk to a stranger. We arranged it so the only vacant seat was next to me.
Business or vacation?
Actually, I'm with ABC News. They're using me to test you on the shyness exercise. You're doing very well.
Since most doctors are now...
ABC News medical editor Dr. Tim Johnson specializes in medical advances and treatment. In this report on breast cancer, he discussed the choices available to women.
Patricia has decided that the least destructive way for her is lumpectomy and radiation. There is one thing Patricia wants other women to know.
Don't put it off. It might be cancerous. It might not be cancerous, but the best thing to do is just go and take care of it.
No! Hey, listen. I'm not going to...
Often the problems we focus on are not life-threatening, but they affect the quality of our life. For example, one of life's biggest challenges is raising children. Often a little advice from the experts makes the job a lot easier. One of my favorite story subjects was Cameron. He was reveling in a stage we called a terrible two. His favorite word was no.
No!
Of course, if Mom said no, Cameron threw a tantrum. The experts had advice on avoiding tantrums, but they said, once it starts, just let it run. Trying to reason with him while he's doing this will probably just make a tantrum worse.
Be real careful.
Several years later, we went back to see Cameron for a report on sibling rivalry. Now he was 5, and his sister Lauren 3. His tantrums were history, but the kids fought all the time.
No, you can't. No!
Their mother was beside herself.
What happened?
I want so much for them to be close.
Yet when we showed our films of her children to child psychologists, they said, stop worrying, just let them fight. It's a healthy way for kids to learn about anger and making up. Stop the fight only if the weaker child is in danger of being really hurt or humiliated. And in fact, a closer look at our tape shows little sister Lauren isn't the innocent victim she seems to be. She often provokes the fight. And the kids, when pressed, do admit they like each other.
She's nice. I would keep Cameron.
You would? How come?
Because he's not my brother.
In my mind.
The experts also had good advice on getting a child to sleep. Russ and Lynn Lutkovich had fallen into a bad pattern. Every night they'd play Lionel Richie music and rock their son, Michael, to sleep. It worked, and they'd put him in his crib. But a few hours later, he'd be awake and screaming. This would go on all night. The whole family was miserable from lack of sleep. The experts' advice, next time he screams, don't rush in. Instead, wait several minutes. And when you do go in, comfort him, but don't pick him up. If he's to become a good sleeper, he must learn to go to sleep on his own, without Mom or a bottle or Lionel Richie. It's tough on Mom, and tough on Michael. The screaming continued all night. They try again the third night. It doesn't start out well. But just 2 minutes later, Michael is quiet. Russ thinks something's wrong.
Just go in and take a look. No. He only cried for a few minutes. 2 minutes. That's amazing.
His parents didn't have to go into his room all night, and Michael has slept well ever since. Our camera crew even got some sleep. Reports like these have been possible only because some of you are kind enough to let us film in your home, sometimes day and night, sometimes even when the camera records moments you might have preferred to keep private.
So I'm blind, so what? And I think basically that's been the way that I've taken life.
Finally, sometimes we 2020 correspondents have stepped aside to let people tell their own stories. In a special series called Personal Touch, well-known people have told how they managed to cope with a crisis or a disability. Stevie Wonder talked about blindness. Jason Robards revealed his struggle with alcoholism. Teddy Kennedy Jr. told how he fought back from cancer. Milton Berle shared his feelings about aging. And Itzhak Perlman's personal touch dealt with disability.
My music was something that I wanted to play before I had polio. So afterwards, there was no reason why I shouldn't just go on. My hands were not affected. Only my legs were affected. Separate the abilities from the disabilities. Let's forget about what doesn't work. Let's see what works.
Separate the abilities from the disabilities. Itzhak Perlman. And there are other people we've met over the years whose lives could have gone either way. Like the very touching story of one little boy who had two men fighting to be his father. How is he doing today? Stone Phillips has another update.
In 1985, Barbara reported the story of Christopher and a California custody fight that tore at the hearts of everyone involved. Jamie, pregnant with Christopher at age 12, had refused to have an abortion.
I didn't like the thought that I'd be killing a part of me, a baby, that when I can just get up for adoption and give it to somebody who'd love it and appreciate a baby.
It was an ordinary adoption story until Michael Upshaw, the 16-year-old biological father, decided he was going to fight.
You know, if she's going to give it up to somebody else, why shouldn't I have it? Because I'm the father.
Did Michael have a right to custody as the child's father? The adoptive parents had cared for Christopher since he was 3 months old.
I love that boy so much, I would do anything for him. I would give him back. If it was the best thing for Christopher, but the best thing for him is to stay with who he knows as his mother and father.
Michael Upshaw, with his mother, went to court to try to gain custody of the boy. It would be an uphill battle for Michael, who'd been in and out of school with a reputation for drug use.
I was kind of looking forward to having my baby.
In court, Michael won the first round. A judge ruled that his rights as the biological father outweighed concern about his fitness as a parent. Glenn and Gail White appealed the decision to the California Supreme Court. Christopher would remain with his adoptive parents in legal limbo while both sides waited for a decision.
This baby is now 2 years old. Do you think of what it might be like for a 2-year-old child who has only known one set of parents? If we think of the good of the child and who loves a father and mother, what this separation might do if he were uprooted and brought here to someone who's a stranger?
Yeah, I thought about that. You know, the kid's going to feel something. But I feel that 2 years ain't nothing compared to the rest of his life.
What if the court again rules against you? And this is the final chapter, and you must give that child up.
Number one, I will never give up the baby. I will never give Christopher back to anyone.
What would you do?
I don't know what I'll do. But like I said before, I couldn't do it, and I won't do it to him. I won't rip him away, and I won't devastate him for the rest of his life.
Here we go. Here we go. Okay? Just the other piece.
That was 2020, May 2nd, 1985.
There were so many people, I'm sure, out there that have wondered, whatever happened to that little boy?
Well, this is what happened. The California Supreme Court ruled in favor of Glenn and Gail White, citing the best interests of Christopher.
To this day, I know that we wouldn't have won in the Supreme Court if this show wouldn't have been shown.
Joy for the Whites was agony for Michael Upshaw. He told 2020 he was devastated by the decision, though he holds no grudge against the Whites. He also says he'll watch tonight to see how Christopher's doing. For the Whites, the custody battle is over, but still very much on their minds.
You can never forget what happened, and it'll always be there. And someday we'll have to explain to Chris, exactly what took place and what happened.
But he needn't know the pain. We don't need to review that with him. We need to let him know the kind of love that was surrounded by him through that entire time.
That little boy, Christopher, sure looks happy, doesn't he? That idea came from a viewer.
There was a grandfather, the adoptive grandfather of little Christopher, who wrote and said, please try to tell what's happening.